Finally, we can get back to what really matters now that this distraction is over. Those words, spoken by my mother-in-law Patricia Bennett at the annual Foundation Gala while I was still bleeding from my miscarriage just 3 days earlier, turned 300 of Chicago's elite into unwitting witnesses of what they assumed would be my public humiliation. But Patricia didn't know about the flash drive in my clutch, the one containing financial records that would transform this moment from my darkest hour into the Bennett family's complete annihilation. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Sarah Elizabeth Bennett, and until that devastating October evening at the Drake Hotel in downtown Chicago, I had spent 7 years building what appeared to be the perfect marriage into one of the city's most prominent business families. As the director of family office services at Morrison Associates, I managed investment portfolios worth hundreds of millions of dollars for Chicago's wealthiest families, including my own husband's empire. The irony wasn't lost on me that I spent my days protecting other people's family wealth while my own family was systematically destroying me from the inside. My corner office on the 42nd floor of the Willis Tower provided a commanding view of Lake Michigan, but it also offered a daily reminder of how high I had climbed and how far I could fall. The Bennett family had welcomed me 7 years, ago when David and I married, though welcomed might be too generous a term. Patricia Bennett, the family matriarch and founder of Bennett Family Holdings, had made it clear from our first meeting that I was being evaluated for my potential contribution to the family legacy. My MBA from Northwestern and CPA certification had earned me grudging respect, but it was my proven ability to generate substantial returns on investment that had secured my place at their mahogany conference table. David Michael Bennett had swept me off my feet during our graduate school years at Northwestern. He possessed the kind of easy charm that made everyone in a room gravitate toward him, combined with the confidence that came from growing up as heir to a real estate empire worth nearly $500 million. Our courtship had felt like a fairy tale, complete with weekend trips to the family estate in Lake Forest and intimate dinners at Chicago's most exclusive restaurants. What I hadn't understood during those early years was that David's charm masked a calculating nature that he had inherited from his mother. The Bennett family didn't just build real estate developments. They built strategic alliances, political connections, and carefully constructed public images that protected their interests above all else. I had been recruited as much for my professional skills as for my heart. The first cracks in our marriage had appeared 18 months ago when we began trying to conceive. After a year of unsuccessful attempts, my physician recommended fertility, testing that revealed complex issues requiring IVF treatment. David had been supportive publicly, accompanying me to appointments and speaking eloquently about our journey at family gatherings. Privately, however, I began noticing subtle changes in his behavior. He started working longer hours at the family company, claiming that launching their new commercial development project in River North required his complete attention. Weekend trips to see clients became more frequent, and his explanations for missed dinners grew increasingly elaborate. I attributed these changes to the stress of expanding the business during uncertain economic times. The fertility treatments proved successful on our third attempt. When Dr. Amanda Foster confirmed the pregnancy last spring, David's reaction had been everything I had hoped for. He held me while I cried tears of joy, immediately calling his mother to share the news. That evening, he surprised me with dinner at Alinea, where he presented me with a vintage bottle of Dom Perignon that we would save for celebrating the birth of our first child. The Bennett family's response to the pregnancy announcement had been enthusiastic, though I noticed an undertone of relief that suggested they had been growing concerned about our ability to produce the next generation. Patricia immediately began planning elaborate celebrations, while David's father Bob started talking about expanding the family trust to include provisions for grandchildren. My pregnancy progressed normally through the first trimester. I had experienced typical morning sickness and fatigue, but nothing that interfered with my demanding schedule at Morrison & Associates. My colleagues were supportive, and several clients sent congratulatory notes when news of the pregnancy reached our professional network. I felt like I was finally achieving the balance between career success and family fulfillment that I had always envisioned. The complications began appearing during my 14-week appointment. Dr. Foster detected irregularities in the ultrasound that required additional testing and monitoring. She assured me that many pregnancies experienced similar issues that resolved without intervention, but recommended reducing my work schedule and avoiding stressful situations. I followed her advice religiously, delegating responsibilities to my team and declining travel that would take me away from Chicago. David's response to the complications had been supportive on the surface, but I noticed a subtle shift in his attention. He began spending even more time at the office, claiming that the River North project had encountered zoning challenges that required intensive lobbying efforts. His evening phone calls became more frequent and private, usually conducted in his home office with the door closed. During this period, I confided primarily in my best friend Jessica Rodriguez, who worked as a senior financial analyst at Morrison and Associates. Jessica had been my closest friend since our first day at Northwestern, and she possessed an intuitive understanding of both my professional and personal challenges. She had noticed the changes in David's behavior before I was willing to acknowledge them myself. "He's distracted," she observed during one of our weekly lunches at Shaw's Crab House. "Even when he's physically present, his mind is somewhere else. That's not normal for someone whose wife is going through pregnancy complications." I defended David, explaining the pressures he faced managing the family business during challenging economic times. Jessica listened patiently, but didn't seem convinced by my explanations. The loss occurred on a Tuesday morning in late July. I had awakened to severe cramping and bleeding that sent us rushing to Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Dr. Foster and her team worked for hours trying to save the pregnancy, but the damage was too extensive. At 16 weeks, we lost the baby that had represented our hopes for starting a family. The medical explanation was clinical and thorough. Placental complications had led to insufficient blood flow, causing fetal distress that couldn't be corrected through intervention. Dr. Foster assured me that the loss wasn't caused by anything I had done or failed to do, but the guilt and grief were overwhelming nonetheless. David held my hand during the medical explanations and drove me home with gentle care. What happened during the following weeks revealed the true character of the people I had considered family for 7 years. David's initial support gradually transformed into impatience with my grieving process. He began making comments about moving forward and not dwelling on what couldn't be changed that felt dismissive of my emotional needs. When I requested additional time off from work to process the loss, he suggested that staying busy would be healthier than wallowing in sadness. The Bennett family's response was even more revealing. Patricia sent flowers with a card expressing condolences, but her follow-up phone call focused primarily on when David and I might attempt pregnancy again. She emphasized the importance of not giving up and reminded me that many couples experienced multiple losses before achieving successful pregnancies. Her tone suggested that my grief was an inconvenience that needed to be managed efficiently. More disturbing were the conversations I accidentally overheard during family gatherings. Patricia and Bob discussed the inheritance implications of our childless status, wondering whether they should modify their estate planning to account for the possibility that David and I might never produce heirs. David's brother Mike and his wife Jennifer made subtle comments about their own children, potentially inheriting larger portions of the family wealth if David's branch remained childless. The most painful moment came during a family barbecue at the Lake Forest estate in early September. David's sister Rebecca posted Instagram photos from the gathering that showed everyone laughing and celebrating while I sat quietly in the background, still struggling with depression from our loss. The captions focused on family fun and making memories without any acknowledgement of the grief that dominated my experience. But it was during that barbecue that I first noticed something that would eventually unravel everything. David received a phone call that he claimed was from a client requiring immediate attention. He stepped away from the family gathering to take the call privately, speaking in hushed tones near the pool house. When he returned, his mood was notably lighter, almost giddy in a way that seemed inappropriate given our recent loss. I began paying closer attention to David's phone habits after that day. He had always been protective of his device, claiming that client confidentiality required strict security measures. However, his behavior became increasingly secretive, with late-night text messages and early morning calls that he claimed were related to East Coast business contacts. When I asked about the increased communication, he became defensive and accused me of being paranoid due to grief-related stress. My suspicions intensified when I discovered a credit card statement that David had attempted to hide. The charges included expensive dinners at restaurants we hadn't visited together, hotel bills from business trips I hadn't known about, and purchases from jewelry stores during times when he claimed to be in client meetings. When I confronted him about the discrepancies, he produced elaborate explanations about entertaining potential investors and purchasing gifts for important business relationships. The breakthrough came in late September when Jessica invited me to lunch at a new restaurant in River North, not far from where David claimed to be working on the family's latest development project. As we walked to our table, I spotted David at a corner booth with a young woman I didn't recognize. They were sitting close together, holding hands across the table in a way that was unmistakably intimate. My first instinct was to confront them immediately, but Jessica grabbed my arm and steered me toward the restroom before David could notice our presence. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "We need to think about this strategically," she whispered urgently. "If you confront him now, he'll have time to create cover stories and destroy evidence. You need to document everything before making any moves." Standing in that restaurant. Bathroom. Staring at my reflection in the mirror, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of reacting emotionally to David's betrayal, I would approach this situation with the same analytical precision I used to manage complex financial portfolios for my clients. If David was deceiving me, I would uncover the full extent of his deception before taking any action. Jessica's advice proved invaluable during the following weeks. As a financial analyst, she understood the importance of gathering comprehensive evidence before reaching conclusions. She helped me develop a systematic approach to investigating David's activities without alerting him to my suspicions. We created a shared document where I could record observations, timeline discrepancies, and financial irregularities. My professional expertise provided significant advantages in conducting this investigation. As Director of Family Office Services, I had extensive experience analyzing complex financial structures and identifying irregularities in accounting records. I understood how wealthy families moved money, created offshore entities, and structured transactions to minimize tax obligations or hide assets from scrutiny. The first phase of my investigation focused on David's personal financial activities. Using my access to family financial records through my professional relationship with Bennett Family Holdings, I began analyzing patterns in David's credit, card usage, bank transfers, and investment account activities. What I discovered was a systematic pattern of financial deception that extended far beyond simple infidelity. David had established multiple credit card accounts that weren't reflected in our joint financial statements. These accounts showed regular charges for expensive dinners, hotel rooms, jewelry purchases, and even apartment rental payments that suggested he was maintaining a separate residence. The timeline of these charges corresponded with his claimed business trips and late-night client meetings. More concerning were bank transfers from David's personal account to entities I didn't recognize. Using my professional databases, I traced these payments to shell companies that appeared to exist solely for receiving funds from Bennett family accounts. The amounts were significant, totaling nearly $200,000 over the past 18 months. My investigation into the shell companies revealed a sophisticated network of financial vehicles designed to hide money movement and ownership. Several of these entities were registered to addresses that didn't exist or led to mail forwarding services. The ownership structures were deliberately complex, involving multiple layers of limited liability companies and trust arrangements that obscured the ultimate beneficiaries. As I dug deeper into these financial structures, I discovered that David wasn't working alone in this deception. The shell companies had been established with the assistance of Jennifer Chen Bennett, his sister-in-law who served as the family's primary attorney. Her law firm had created the legal documentation for these entities, suggesting that at least some family members were aware of David's activities. The most shocking discovery came when I analyzed the timing of David's financial movements in relation to significant family business decisions. Large transfers to the shell companies occurred shortly before Bennett Family Holdings announced major transactions, such as property acquisitions or development project launches. This pattern suggested that David was using insider information to generate profits through entities that weren't subject to family oversight. During this investigation period, I maintained my normal routine while carefully documenting David's continuing deception. He persisted in claiming that his late nights and weekend absences were related to business development activities. However, my financial analysis proved that most of his claimed business meetings didn't correspond with any legitimate company expenses or documented client interactions. The emotional toll of maintaining this facade while grieving our pregnancy loss and uncovering David's systematic betrayal was enormous. I found myself crying alone in my office bathroom between client meetings, struggling to maintain professional composure while my personal life disintegrated. Jessica provided crucial emotional support during this period, often staying late to help me process new discoveries and plan next steps. My investigation expanded to include David's relationship with the young woman I had seen at the restaurant. Through careful observation and discreet inquiries, I learned that her name was Lauren Ashley Parker, a 26-year-old marketing coordinator who worked at Bennett Family Holdings. She had been hired 8 months earlier, coincidentally around the time that David's suspicious financial activities had intensified. Lauren's social media profiles revealed a lifestyle that seemed inconsistent with a junior marketing coordinator's salary. Her Instagram posts showed expensive vacations, designer clothing, and dining at Chicago's most exclusive restaurants. Many of these posts were tagged with locations and timestamps that corresponded with David's unexplained absences from our marriage. The connection between Lauren's elevated lifestyle and David's shell company transfers became clear when I discovered that she was receiving regular payments through one of the entities he had established. These payments were disguised as consulting fees for marketing services, but the amounts far exceeded what would be reasonable for a junior employee's freelance work. The morning after discovering David's financial deception through the shell companies, I sat in my office overlooking Lake Michigan, watching the sunrise paint the water in shades of gold and crimson. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was about to use the same analytical skills that had built my reputation in Chicago's financial circles to systematically dismantle my own husband's criminal enterprise. My first call was to my brother Marcus in Detroit, a forensic accountant who specialized in white-collar crime investigations for major corporations. Marcus and I had always maintained a close relationship despite living in different cities, and his expertise in financial fraud detection would prove invaluable in building an airtight case against David and his accomplices. Marcus arrived in Chicago that weekend under the pretense of visiting for my birthday, a cover story that would allow him to spend time at our Lincoln Park townhouse without arousing David's suspicions. Over dinner at home, while David was distracted by football, games, and business calls, Marcus and I began planning our investigation strategy in coded conversations that sounded like casual family catching up. "Remember when we used to build those elaborate treasure hunts as kids?" Marcus asked, cutting into his steak while maintaining eye contact with me. "You always were better at following the clues to find where people hid things." His message was clear. He would help me trace the money trail that David had tried so carefully to conceal. The following Monday, Marcus established himself in a temporary office space downtown, officially consulting for a Detroit-based firm on a project involving Chicago real estate investments. This legitimate business purpose gave him cover to access public records, financial databases, and other resources needed for our investigation without raising questions about his presence in the city. Working together, we developed a comprehensive approach to documenting David's fraud. Marcus handled the technical forensic analysis while I used my insider access to Bennett Family Holdings to gather internal documents and communication records. Our goal was to build evidence that would satisfy criminal prosecutors, civil litigators, and regulatory authorities simultaneously. The scope of David's deception became clear as we analyzed 18 months of financial records. He had created 7 separate shell companies, each designed to serve different functions in his overall scheme. Some entities existed to receive funds siphoned from Bennett Family Holdings contracts, while others were established to make payments to Lauren and other personal expenses that David wanted to hide from family oversight. Marcus discovered that David's fraud extended beyond simple embezzlement into sophisticated securities violations. He had been selling confidential information about Bennett Family Holdings development projects to competitors, allowing them to outbid the family company on lucrative contracts. The profits from these information sales were laundered through his shell companies and used to fund his secret lifestyle with Lauren. "Sarah, this isn't just marriage-ending fraud," Marcus explained during one of our evening strategy sessions. "Your husband is looking at federal prison time for securities violations, money laundering, and probably RICO charges if prosecutors decide to go after the whole family operation." The weight of his words settled over me as I realized that exposing David would likely destroy the entire Bennett family empire. Despite everything they had put me through, I hesitated at the thought of bringing down Patricia, Bob, and the other family members who might be innocent of David's specific crimes. Marcus sensed my reluctance and reminded me that protecting criminals, even family members, only enabled them to hurt more people. The Bennett family built their wealth through political connections and questionable business practices, he said. David learned this behavior somewhere, and chances are good that other family members knew exactly what he was doing. Our investigation into the family's broader activities revealed a pattern of ethical violations that dated back decades. Bennett Family Holdings had consistently won development contracts through relationships with city officials who later received lucrative consulting positions with the company. Environmental studies for major projects had been falsified to hide contamination issues that would have prevented development approval. Safety inspections at construction sites were routinely bypassed through payments to corrupt inspectors. David's individual crimes were part of a larger system of corruption that had made the Bennett family wealthy at the expense of Chicago taxpayers and residents. The shell companies he had created were modeled on similar entities that the family had used for years to hide political donations, bribe payments, and other illegal activities. Far from being an aberration, David's fraud represented the family business operating exactly as it had been designed. Jessica proved invaluable during this period, using her position at Morrison Associates to gather intelligence about the Bennett family's investment activities and client relationships. Her access to industry databases and professional networks allowed us to verify information and identify additional sources of evidence without alerting anyone to our investigation. "I've been watching the Bennett family's portfolio performance for years," Jessica confided during one of our lunch meetings. "Their returns are consistently higher than market averages in ways that don't make sense unless they're using insider information or manipulating deals behind the scenes." Her observations confirmed our suspicions that David's crimes were part of a broader pattern of illegal activity. During this investigation period, David continued his charade of being a devoted husband working long hours to build our future together. He brought me flowers on the anniversary of our pregnancy loss, took me to expensive dinners when he wasn't secretly meeting Lauren, and spoke earnestly about our plans to try for another baby once I felt emotionally ready. His performance was so convincing that I might have questioned my own evidence if not for the mathematical certainty of financial records. The cognitive dissonance of living with someone whose criminal activities I was documenting became almost unbearable. I found myself studying David across the breakfast table, wondering how someone could express such convincing concern for my emotional well-being while systematically stealing from his own family and betraying our marriage vows. The man I had loved for 7 years seemed to have been replaced by a stranger whose entire personality was an elaborate fiction. My investigation revealed that David's relationship with Lauren had begun shortly after we started fertility treatments, suggesting that my pregnancy struggles had prompted him to seek alternative arrangements rather than supporting me through medical challenges. Financial records showed that his first payments to Lauren's shell company consulting arrangement began during the same week I received my initial infertility diagnosis. The timeline was devastating in its implications. While I was undergoing painful medical procedures and dealing with the emotional toll of fertility challenges, David was establishing a secret life with a younger woman and funding their relationship through money stolen from his family's business. The pregnancy that we had eventually achieved together had been conceived during a period when he was already planning his exit strategy from our marriage. Even more disturbing was evidence suggesting that David had been hoping for our pregnancy to fail. Text messages recovered from his company phone showed communications with Lauren expressing frustration about the complications that my pregnancy had created for their relationship. He had apparently promised her that he would leave me after our loss, but was waiting for an appropriate period to pass before making his move. The depth of David's deception extended to our fertility treatments themselves. Medical insurance. Records showed that he had been researching reversible vasectomy procedures while publicly supporting our efforts to conceive. His enthusiasm for our pregnancy had been entirely performative, designed to maintain his position in the family business, while secretly planning to prevent future pregnancies that might complicate his relationship with Lauren. As October approached, and the foundation gala drew near, Marcus and I finalized our evidence package for multiple audiences. We prepared criminal referrals for federal prosecutors, civil complaints for victims of the Bennett family's fraud, and regulatory filings with securities authorities who could freeze the family's assets while investigations proceeded. Our documentation was thorough enough to withstand challenges from the high-powered legal teams that the Bennett family would undoubtedly hire. The personal cost of maintaining this investigation while grieving our pregnancy loss and preparing for the destruction of my marriage had been enormous. I was losing weight, sleeping poorly, and struggling to maintain professional performance while documenting the crimes of someone I had once trusted completely. Dr. Amanda Foster had prescribed antidepressants and recommended counseling, but nothing could address the fundamental trauma of discovering that my entire adult life had been built on lies. Jessica provided crucial emotional support during this period, often staying late in the office to help me process new discoveries and plan strategic responses. Her friendship became the anchor that kept me grounded while everything else in my life disintegrated. "You're going to come through this stronger," she promised during one particularly difficult evening. "And you're going to save other people from becoming victims of the same family that destroyed your trust." My relationship with my work colleagues at Morrison Associates remained professional, but several people commented on the stress they observed in my behavior. I attributed my distraction to grief over our pregnancy loss, which was true enough to deflect further questions. Most people understood that fertility struggles and pregnancy loss created ongoing emotional challenges that couldn't be resolved quickly. The Bennett family's behavior during this period confirmed everything I had learned about their character through financial investigation. Patricia continued making subtle comments about my emotional instability and the need for David to consider his options if I couldn't recover appropriately from our loss. Bob suggested that extended counseling might help me develop a more positive attitude about future pregnancy attempts. Their lack of empathy was breathtaking in its callousness. David's siblings, Mike and Jennifer, began making more frequent comments about inheritance planning and the possibility that their children might represent the family's future. if David and I remain childless. Rebecca posted social media content celebrating her own family, while pointedly excluding me from group photos and activities. The message was clear. My value to the Bennett family was entirely dependent on my ability to produce heirs, and my pregnancy loss had diminished my standing significantly. The most painful aspect of this period was watching David interact with his young niece Emma during family gatherings. He was patient, playful, and genuinely affectionate with the 8-year-old in ways that reminded me why I had fallen in love with him originally. His capacity for authentic emotion with Emma made his calculated deception toward me even more devastating by comparison. I began documenting these family interactions as additional evidence of the psychological manipulation that the Bennett family used to control people in their orbit. Their treatment of me during my grief provided insight into how they viewed relationships and loyalty. Purely transactional arrangements that could be terminated when they no longer served family interests. The technical challenge of gathering evidence without alerting David or other family members required careful planning and execution. I used my legitimate access to Bennett Family Holdings records to document the shell companies, but had to be strategic about timing and scope to avoid triggering security alerts that might expose my investigation. Marcus provided guidance on maintaining evidence integrity that would satisfy legal requirements for prosecution. Our preparation for the Foundation Gala included contingency plans for various scenarios that might emerge during or after my planned revelation. We anticipated that the Bennett family would hire crisis management specialists and aggressive legal counsel to minimize damage from public exposure. Their political connections might enable them to influence investigation timelines or evidence preservation requirements. Marcus established secure backup systems for all evidence in multiple jurisdictions, ensuring that the Bennett family couldn't use their influence to suppress documentation or intimidate witnesses. He also prepared referrals to federal authorities in Detroit and other cities where the family had business interests, creating multiple parallel investigations that would be difficult to coordinate suppression efforts. The week before the Foundation Gala, David's behavior became increasingly erratic as he juggled preparations for the family's most important social event of the year, while maintaining his secret relationship with Lauren and managing his criminal enterprises. He claimed to be working 18-hour days coordinating vendor logistics and guest management, but I knew from my financial monitoring that he was actually spending significant time with Lauren at the apartment he had rented for their private meetings. David's stress manifested in increasingly elaborate lies about his activities and mounting pressure on me to attend the Foundation Gala, despite my ongoing grief over our pregnancy loss. He insisted that public appearances were important for family, unity, and business relationships, and that my absence would be interpreted as instability that could affect investor confidence in Bennett Family Holdings. Patricia escalated the pressure through phone calls, emphasizing the importance of presenting a united family front during the Foundation Gala. She reminded me that the event raised money for children's charities that had supported our community for decades, and that my personal grief shouldn't interfere with the family's philanthropic responsibilities. Her tone suggested that my emotional needs were secondary to the family's public image requirements. The final piece of evidence emerged 3 days before the Foundation Gala, when Marcus intercepted communications between David and Lauren discussing their plans to leave Chicago together after the event. They had apparently decided that the timing was appropriate to end David's marriage and begin their public relationship, with Lauren transitioning to a more senior role at Bennett Family Holdings that would justify her elevated lifestyle. Their communications revealed that David planned to blame our marriage failure on my inability to handle pregnancy loss and my supposed emotional instability that had made me an unsuitable partner for someone in his position. He intended to present Lauren as a supportive colleague who had helped him through a difficult period, gradually transitioning their professional relationship into a personal one that his family would eventually accept. The arrogance and calculated cruelty of this plan crystallized my determination to expose everything during the Foundation Gala, rather than pursuing private confrontation or quiet divorce proceedings. David and his family had demonstrated such complete disregard for my dignity and emotional well-being that they deserved no consideration for their reputations or business interests when justice was delivered. Standing in my closet the night before the foundation gala, selecting my outfit for what I knew would be the most important performance of my life, I felt a calm determination that reminded me of preparing for crucial client presentations at Morrison Associates. The woman who had discovered her husband's betrayal while grieving their lost child was about to become the architect of the Bennett family's public destruction, and I intended to execute that plan with the same precision I brought to managing complex financial portfolios. The flash drive in my clutch contained enough evidence to destroy multiple lives and careers, but I felt no uncertainty about my decision to use it. The Bennett family had celebrated my pregnancy loss as the end of a distraction, not understanding that they had actually freed me from any obligation to protect them from the consequences of their own criminal behavior. Tomorrow evening, I would give them a loss they would never recover from. As October approached and the annual Bennett Family Foundation Gala drew near, I realized that I had uncovered a web of deception that extended far beyond simple marital infidelity. David was systematically stealing from his own family's business while using company resources to fund his relationship with Lauren. His shell companies were siphoning money that should have been generating returns for family investors, including several charitable foundations that depended on Bennett Family Holdings for funding. The foundation gala represented the perfect opportunity to expose David's deception in front of the entire Bennett family social network. The event would bring together 300 of Chicago's most influential business leaders, including family investors, board members, and media representatives who covered the city's charitable and business activities. But I needed more than financial evidence to ensure that David's deception would be fully exposed and prosecuted. Working with Jessica, I developed a plan to gather irrefutable proof of his activities, while positioning myself to reveal everything at the moment of maximum impact. The woman who had lost her baby and discovered her husband's betrayal was about to become the architect of the Bennett family's complete destruction. The morning of the foundation gala dawned crisp and clear, with Lake Michigan reflecting the autumn sky like polished steel. I stood at my bedroom window watching joggers navigate the lakefront path, marveling at how normal the world appeared while I prepared to detonate the most explosive revelation in Chicago business history. The irony wasn't lost on me that David was downstairs making coffee and humming cheerfully, completely unaware that his criminal empire would be exposed in less than 12 hours. My preparation began with a shower that felt ceremonial, washing away the last remnants of the naive woman who had trusted the Bennett family's carefully constructed facade. The hot water cascaded over my shoulders as I mentally rehearsed the evening's timeline, ensuring that every element of my plan would unfold with surgical precision. Tonight would require the performance of a lifetime, and I intended to deliver it flawlessly. The selection of my outfit had been deliberate and strategic. I chose a midnight blue Armani gown that conveyed authority while maintaining elegance, paired with the diamond tennis bracelet that David had given me for our 5th anniversary. The symbolism pleased me. I would expose his crimes while wearing the jewelry he had purchased with stolen money from his own family's business. My hair was styled in a sleek chignon that projected confidence, while my makeup emphasized my eyes to ensure that every person in that ballroom would remember my expression when I delivered the truth. David emerged from his home office around noon, dressed in his charcoal Tom Ford tuxedo and radiating the confident energy that had always been his trademark. He approached me with a kiss on the cheek and a compliment about my appearance, maintaining the facade of devoted husband even as he prepared to attend the gala with his mistress seated strategically across the ballroom. His performance was masterful, but I had learned to recognize the calculation behind his charm. "You look absolutely stunning," he said, adjusting his platinum cufflinks with the Bennett family crest. "Mother will be pleased to see you looking so well. She's been concerned about your emotional state since the loss." His casual reference to our pregnancy as the loss rather than our loss revealed everything I needed to know about his true feelings regarding the tragedy that had shattered my heart while apparently relieving his. The drive to the Drake Hotel proceeded in comfortable silence, with David occasionally commenting on Chicago traffic or pointing out construction projects managed by Bennett Family Holdings. His ease and confidence were remarkable given that he was unknowingly transporting the person who would destroy his freedom and reputation before the evening concluded. I responded to his observations with appropriate interest while mentally reviewing the evidence files that Marcus had organized for maximum impact. The Drake Hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed into an elegant showcase for Chicago's philanthropic elite, with crystal chandeliers casting warm light over tables. Arranged around a central dance floor, massive floral arrangements in deep burgundy and gold created intimate conversation areas while maintaining sightlines that would ensure my planned revelation reached every corner of the room. The setting was perfect for what I intended to accomplish. Patricia Bennett held court near the ballroom entrance, resplendent in emerald silk that complemented her silver hair and commanding presence. She greeted arriving guests with the practiced warmth of someone who had spent decades managing Chicago's social hierarchies, ensuring that each person felt appropriately acknowledged according to their wealth and influence. Her smile toward me was coolly polite, conveying measured approval of my appearance while maintaining emotional distance that had characterized our relationship since my pregnancy loss. "Sarah, darling, you look lovely this evening," Patricia said, air-kissing my cheeks while scanning the room for more important arrivals. "I'm so pleased you felt well enough to attend. David mentioned that you've been struggling with your emotional recovery, and I thought it best that you rejoin normal social activities rather than dwelling on disappointment." Her casual cruelty was breathtaking, but I maintained perfect composure, while filing away her words as additional motivation for the destruction I was about to unleash. Bob Bennett approached with his characteristic bonhomie, clasping David's shoulder while nodding approvingly at my appearance. "The whole family looks spectacular tonight," he announced. "This is exactly the kind of unity and strength that our investors and community partners expect from the Bennett organization." His emphasis on family unity would prove ironic within hours, when that same family would be torn apart by revelations of systematic criminal behavior. The cocktail hour proceeded according to the carefully orchestrated schedule that Patricia had managed for decades. Chicago's business elite circulated through the ballroom, engaging in conversations that combined social pleasantries with strategic networking designed to advance various professional and political interests. I moved through these interactions with practiced grace, accepting condolences about our pregnancy loss while deflecting questions about future family planning with appropriate dignity. Jessica arrived fashionably late, stunning in black silk that emphasized her natural elegance, while maintaining the professional demeanor that had made her one of Morrison Associates' most respected analysts. Her presence provided crucial emotional support during the cocktail hour, and our conversations appeared casual while actually confirming final details of the evening's plan. She had positioned herself strategically to document reactions and ensure that key witnesses remained present during my planned revelation. "The guest list is exactly what we expected," Jessica murmured, while we admired the auction items displayed around the ballroom perimeter. "Every major investor is here, along with the media contacts who cover Chicago business news. The timing couldn't be more perfect for maximum impact." Her words reinforced my confidence that the evening would proceed according to plan. Marcus had arrived separately and positioned himself near the bar, appearing to be a successful businessman, enjoying the city's premier charitable event while actually serving as my security backup and evidence coordinator. His presence provided reassurance that our documentation was properly protected and that witness statements could be gathered if the Bennett family attempted to suppress information or intimidate people who observed the evening's events. David's behavior during the cocktail hour revealed the stress he was experiencing while managing multiple deceptions simultaneously. He engaged in animated conversations with family business partners while frequently checking his phone for messages that I knew were coming from Lauren, who was seated at a table across the ballroom with other junior Bennett Family Holdings employees. His ability to compartmentalize different aspects of his criminal activities was impressive, but I detected subtle signs of anxiety in his increased alcohol consumption and nervous energy. Lauren Parker looked stunning in a rose gold gown that was far more expensive than her legitimate salary could support, paid for through the consulting arrangement that David had created using embezzled family funds. She maintained appropriate professional distance from David during public interactions, while exchanging meaningful glances that would have been invisible to casual observers, but were obvious to someone who understood their secret relationship. Her confidence suggested that she believed her elevation to family prominence was imminent. The dinner portion of the evening began with Patricia delivering welcoming remarks that emphasized the Bennett family's commitment to Chicago's charitable community and their pride in continuing traditions of philanthropy that had defined their legacy for decades. Her speech was eloquent and moving, describing various children's programs that had been supported through foundation grants while carefully positioning the family as responsible stewards of community resources. As the main course was served, I observed the complex dynamics that governed interactions among Chicago's business elite. Conversations flowed seamlessly between charitable causes, investment opportunities, political developments, and social gossip, with participants demonstrating the sophisticated awareness of power relationships that enabled them to navigate these waters successfully. Everyone present understood that charitable events served multiple functions beyond fundraising, creating opportunities for deal-making and relationship building that drove the city's economic and political systems. David delivered a brief presentation about Bennett Family Holdings' recent achievements, highlighting successful development projects and community partnerships that had generated both profits and positive public relations for the company. His remarks were well received, reinforcing the family's reputation for combining business success with social responsibility. The irony of his presentation was profound, given that I possessed evidence proving that many of these achievements had been obtained through fraud and corruption. The auction segment provided entertainment while generating additional funds for the foundation's charitable activities. Items ranged from luxury vacation packages to exclusive dining experiences, with bidding becoming increasingly competitive as Chicago's wealthy elite demonstrated their generosity and social status through conspicuous charitable giving. Patricia served as auctioneer with her characteristic wit and charm, coaxing higher bids while maintaining the elegant atmosphere that made these events successful year after year. I participated appropriately in the auction bidding, winning a weekend at a Lake Geneva resort that David and I would never actually use together. The purchase served to maintain my cover while positioning me as someone committed to the foundation's success, ensuring that my later revelations couldn't be dismissed as the actions of someone hostile to the family's charitable work. Every element of my behavior was calculated to support the credibility of my planned accusations. As the formal program concluded and guests began moving toward the dance floor and continued networking, I excused myself to visit the restroom, where I retrieved the flash drive from my clutch and confirmed that Marcus was in position to begin recording the evening's climactic events. Jessica caught my eye from across the ballroom and nodded almost imperceptibly, confirming that key. Witnesses remained present and positioned to observe what was about to unfold. The moment arrived when Patricia called for attention to present the evening's special recognition, an annual tradition where the foundation honored individuals or organizations that had made exceptional contributions to Chicago's charitable community. This year's recipient was supposed to be a surprise, but I knew from my investigation of family communications that David had been selected to receive the award in recognition of his leadership in expanding the foundation's impact. David's selection for this honor represented the perfect irony. The man who had systematically stolen from his family's business and betrayed his wife during her grief was about to be celebrated for his charitable leadership in front of Chicago's most influential citizens. The disconnect between public perception and private reality was so complete that it demanded correction through public revelation of the truth. As Patricia began her introduction of the evening's honoree, describing his dedication to family, values, and community service, I felt the familiar calm that preceded complex surgical procedures at Morrison and Associates. The analytical precision that had built my professional reputation would now be applied to dismantling David's criminal enterprise and exposing the corruption that had enriched the Bennett family at the expense of Chicago taxpayers and investors. Before we proceed with tonight's recognition, Patricia continued, I want to acknowledge how proud we are of David's resilience during a challenging personal period. Finally, we can get back to what really matters now that this distraction is over. Her casual dismissal of our pregnancy loss as a distraction provided the perfect opening for my response, demonstrating the callousness that had motivated my decision to expose everything publicly rather than pursuing private resolution. The ballroom fell silent as 300 guests recognized that something significant was about to happen. Patricia's comment had been delivered with characteristic insensitivity, but the context made it particularly cruel given that everyone present knew about our recent loss. The uncomfortable silence that followed created exactly the dramatic tension I needed to capture complete attention for my revelation. I stood slowly, my movement deliberate and controlled as I prepared to deliver the most important speech of my life. The flash drive felt substantial in my hand as I extracted it from my clutch, its weight representing months of investigation and evidence gathering that would transform this moment from David's triumph into his complete destruction. The woman, who had been dismissed as an emotional liability, was about to demonstrate the precision and power that came from combining professional expertise with personal motivation for justice. Patricia, since we're acknowledging family matters tonight, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom, I thought everyone should know the complete truth about what's been distracting David during our marriage. The flash drive gleamed under the chandeliers as I held it up for everyone to see, its contents representing the end of the Bennett family's criminal empire and the beginning of my transformation from victim to agent of justice. The silence that followed my words stretched across the grand ballroom like a held breath, 300 faces turning toward me with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. Patricia's confident smile faltered as she processed my interruption, while David's face went through a fascinating series of micro-expressions that revealed his growing alarm. The flash drive in my raised hand caught the light from the crystal chandeliers, drawing every eye in the room to the small device that contained enough evidence to destroy multiple lives and careers. Sarah, perhaps this isn't the appropriate time or place, David said, his voice carrying a forced lightness that couldn't quite mask his panic. He took a step toward me, his hand extended as if to guide me away from the microphone, but I moved smoothly out of his reach while maintaining perfect eye contact with the assembled crowd. His attempt at damage control only served to heighten the tension and confirm that something significant was about to be revealed. On the contrary, David, I replied, my voice steady and professional despite the magnitude of what I was about. To unleash. This is exactly the right time and place. After all, we're here tonight to celebrate the Bennett family's contributions to our community, and I think everyone deserves to know the complete truth about how this family has been operating, behind the scenes. The murmur that rippled through the crowd confirmed that I had captured their complete attention. Patricia attempted to regain control of the situation, stepping forward with the authority that had commanded Chicago's social hierarchy for decades. I'm sure whatever concerns you have can be addressed privately within the family, she said, her tone carrying the implicit threat that had kept many people silent over the years. This is hardly the venue for personal grievances. Her dismissive approach revealed exactly the arrogance that had motivated me to choose this public forum for my revelations. Personal grievances? I repeated, allowing a note of incredulity to enter my voice. Patricia, This flash drive contains evidence of systematic fraud, embezzlement, and securities violations that have been conducted through Bennett Family Holdings for years. What I'm about to share goes far beyond personal matters to criminal behavior that has affected every investor, partner, and charitable organization associated with your family's business empire. The transformation in the room's atmosphere was immediate and electric. Conversations ceased entirely as guests recognized that they were witnessing something far more serious than family drama. Several prominent business leaders leaned forward, in their chairs, while others pulled out phones to begin recording what was clearly becoming a historic moment in Chicago's business community. The social event had instantly transformed into a criminal exposure, with implications that would ripple through the city's power structures. Bob Bennett rose from his seat, his jovial demeanor replaced by the hard expression of someone accustomed to using intimidation to protect family interests. "Young lady, I suggest you consider very carefully what you're about to say," he warned, his voice carrying the weight of decades spent crushing business rivals and silencing critics. "False accusations can have serious legal consequences, and the Bennett family has resources to defend our reputation against malicious attacks." His threat only strengthened my resolve and provided perfect justification for the public nature of my revelation. "Bob, the beauty of what I'm about to share is that it's all completely documented and verifiable," I responded, connecting the flash drive to the ballroom's audio-visual system with practiced efficiency. "I've spent months gathering evidence, with the help of forensic accounting specialists, and everything you're about to see has been verified through multiple independent sources." The large screens around the ballroom illuminated with financial documents that immediately captured the attention of every person present. Bank transfer records, shell company formations, and communication logs filled the displays in a presentation that I had carefully designed to be comprehensible to both financial professionals and general audiences. The first slide showed a timeline of David's fraudulent activities, beginning with the establishment of his first shell company 8 months after our wedding. "As you can see," I continued, using a laser pointer to highlight specific transactions, "David has been systematically stealing from Bennett Family Holdings through a network of 7 shell companies that were designed to hide money movement and ownership. The total amount embezzled over the past 18 months exceeds $2.4 million, funds that were supposed to be generating returns for family investors and supporting the charitable activities we're celebrating tonight." The gasp that went up from the audience was audible and genuine, reflecting the shock of discovering that one of Chicago's most prominent families was built on criminal fraud. Several board members of organizations that had invested with Bennett Family Holdings immediately began making phone calls, while others demanded printed copies of the evidence being displayed. The controlled chaos that began spreading through the ballroom confirmed that my revelation was having exactly the impact I had intended. David's composure finally cracked completely as he realized the scope of evidence I possessed and the impossibility of containing the damage through his usual charm and manipulation. "Sarah, you don't understand the complexities of business finance," he said desperately, his voice rising to compete with the growing noise from the crowd. "These transactions were legitimate business arrangements that you're misinterpreting because you're emotionally unstable from our pregnancy loss." His attempt to use our tragedy as a weapon against my credibility proved to be a catastrophic miscalculation. The room's sympathy, which might have been available to him under different circumstances, evaporated instantly as guests recognized the cruelty of his strategy. Several women in the audience visibly recoiled at his words, while men who had business relationships with David began reconsidering their associations with someone who would attack his grieving wife's mental health to avoid accountability for financial crimes. "Emotional instability?" I repeated, allowing my voice to carry a note of steel that cut through his desperation. "David, let me show everyone just how emotionally stable I've been while documenting your criminal activities." The next slide displayed communication records between David and Lauren Parker, including text messages that explicitly discussed their relationship, and his plans to leave me after our pregnancy loss made the timing socially acceptable. The revelation of David's affair might have been shocking on its own, but in the context of his financial crimes and cruel manipulation of our tragedy, it became the final piece of evidence that destroyed any remaining sympathy for his position. Lauren Parker, who had been seated across the ballroom maintaining professional distance, suddenly found herself the focus of 300 pairs of eyes as her photograph appeared on the screens alongside records of payments she had received through David's fraudulent consulting arrangements. Lauren Ashley Parker, I announced, has been receiving payments through David's shell companies totaling over $300,000 over the past 8 months, far exceeding what would be reasonable compensation for a junior marketing coordinator's legitimate services. These payments have funded her luxury lifestyle, while she conducted an affair with my husband during the most difficult period of our marriage. Lauren's reaction was immediate and devastating to her credibility. Rather than maintaining dignity or attempting to defend herself, she stood abruptly and began moving toward the ballroom exit, confirming through her flight response that everything I had revealed was accurate. Her obvious guilt eliminated any possibility that David's supporters could frame my accusations as misunderstandings or personal vendettas rather than documented criminal behavior. Patricia's attempt to regain control of the situation revealed the family's instinctive response to crisis: attack the messenger rather than address the substance of accusations. "This is clearly a coordinated attack designed to damage our family's reputation," she declared, her voice carrying the authority that had intimidated opponents for decades. "Sarah has obviously been planning this vindictive display for months, using her professional access to misrepresent normal business transactions as criminal behavior." Her response provided the perfect opening for my next revelation, which would demonstrate that David's crimes were part of a broader pattern of corruption that implicated other family members. "Patricia, since you mentioned coordination, let me show everyone the legal documents that were prepared to establish David's shell companies," I said, advancing to slides that displayed Jennifer Chen Bennett's law firm letterhead on incorporation papers and trust agreements. The evidence that Jennifer had provided legal services for David's fraudulent entities immediately implicated her in the criminal conspiracy, transforming what might have been seen as one family member's individual misconduct into systematic corruption involving multiple participants. Jennifer's face went white as she recognized her firm's documentation being displayed to an audience that included several judges, prosecutors, and legal ethics authorities who could destroy her career within days. "These legal structures," I continued, "were created with the full knowledge that they would be used to hide embezzled funds and facilitate securities fraud. The complexity and sophistication of these arrangements proves that this wasn't impulsive criminal behavior, but a carefully planned conspiracy involving multiple family members with specialized expertise." Bob Bennett's reaction revealed the desperation of someone watching decades of careful reputation management dissolve in real time. "Enough!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the ballroom as he abandoned any pretense of dignity or control. "Security, remove this woman immediately. She's clearly having some kind of mental breakdown and needs medical attention rather than enabling her delusions." His attempt to have me forcibly removed backfired spectacularly when Marcus stepped forward from his position near the bar, displaying federal credentials that immediately established his authority in the situation. "I'm Marcus Thompson, forensic accountant with the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Financial Crimes Division," he announced, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone accustomed to high-stakes investigations. "Mrs. Bennett is presenting evidence that has already been reviewed and verified by federal authorities as part of an ongoing criminal investigation. The revelation that federal law enforcement was already involved transformed the evening from family drama into a criminal matter with immediate legal implications for everyone present. Several guests who had been recording the events on their phones suddenly became uncertain about their legal exposure, while others began demanding to know whether their own business relationships with Bennett Family Holdings would be affected by criminal prosecutions. David's final attempt at damage control revealed the complete bankruptcy of his character and the arrogance that had enabled his criminal behavior for years. "You're all making a serious mistake," he declared, his voice carrying a mixture of desperation and threats that convinced any remaining doubters of his guilt. "The Bennett family has relationships and resources that will destroy anyone who supports these false accusations. Sarah will regret this vindictive display when she realizes the consequences of attacking people with our connections and influence." His threats only served to demonstrate exactly why public exposure had been necessary rather than private confrontation or quiet legal proceedings. The Bennett family's instinctive response to accountability was intimidation and retaliation, confirming that they had used these tactics successfully for years to silence critics and avoid consequences for their behavior. Their reaction to exposure revealed the corrupt mindset that had enabled systematic criminal activity. The moment when everything crystallized came when Patricia made one final attempt to dismiss the evening's revelations as personal grievances, rather than criminal matters. "This is obviously the desperate act of a woman who couldn't handle her pregnancy loss and is lashing out at everyone around her," she declared with characteristic cruelty. "Sarah's emotional instability has been a concern for months, and this vindictive display proves that she needs professional help rather than encouragement for her delusions." Her words provided the perfect culmination for my prepared response, which would demonstrate that far from being emotionally unstable, I had been methodically building a case with the precision and thoroughness that had defined my professional career. "Patricia, since you keep mentioning emotional instability, let me share one more piece of evidence that shows exactly how calculating and deliberate my investigation has been." The final slide displayed medical records that proved David had been researching vasectomy procedures while publicly supporting our fertility treatments, along with insurance claims that revealed his secret consultations with urologists during the same period when we were spending thousands of dollars on IVF procedures. The evidence that he had been actively working to prevent pregnancy while encouraging me to undergo painful medical treatments provided the ultimate demonstration of his manipulative cruelty. The room's reaction to this revelation was immediate and visceral. Even people who might have been sympathetic to David's business crimes found his medical deception unforgivable, particularly given the emotional and physical toll that fertility treatments had taken on my health and well-being. His willingness to allow me to suffer through unnecessary medical procedures while secretly ensuring they would fail revealed a level of sadism that shocked even Chicago's cynical business elite. The evening concluded with federal agents arriving to begin formal evidence collection and witness interviews, transforming the Drake Hotel's grand ballroom into a crime scene investigation rather than a charitable fundraiser. As I watched David being led away in handcuffs while Patricia and other family members consulted frantically with their attorneys, I felt the profound satisfaction that came from delivering justice with surgical precision. The woman who had been dismissed as an emotional liability had become the architect of the Bennett family's complete destruction, using her professional expertise and personal determination to expose systematic corruption that had enriched criminals at the expense of honest investors and charitable organizations. The pregnancy loss that they had celebrated as the end of a distraction had actually freed me from any obligation to protect them from the consequences of their own criminal behavior. 6 months after the foundation gala that destroyed the Bennett family empire, I stood in the corner office of my new firm, Bennett Asset Recovery Services, watching the Chicago River flow toward Lake Michigan through floor-to-ceiling windows that provided a commanding view of the city's financial district. The irony of naming my company after the family that had betrayed me wasn't lost on anyone in Chicago's business community, but it served as a daily reminder that their destruction had become the foundation of my transformation from victim to the city's most sought-after forensic financial investigator. The morning began with a call from Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Martinez, who had been leading the federal prosecution of David and his co-conspirators for the past several months. Her voice carried the satisfaction of someone who had built an airtight case using the evidence I had provided, combined with additional discoveries that federal investigators had uncovered during their expanded probe into Bennett Family Holdings operations. "Sarah, I wanted to give you a heads up before the news breaks," Rebecca said, her professional tone unable to completely mask her excitement. "David accepted a plea agreement this morning. 22 years in federal prison, full restitution, to all victims, and cooperation with ongoing investigations into political corruption that his family's activities helped uncover. He'll be eligible for parole in 18 years if he maintains good behavior and continues providing useful testimony." The news should have brought closure, but instead it felt like another milestone in a journey that had transformed my understanding of justice, forgiveness, and the complex relationships between personal healing and public accountability. David's imprisonment would protect other potential victims from his manipulative cruelty, but it couldn't restore the pregnancy we had lost or repair the emotional damage caused by years of systematic deception. My assistant knocked and entered with a stack of case files that represented the growing demand for specialized forensic investigation services from wealthy families who had witnessed the Bennett family's destruction and wanted to ensure their own organizations weren't vulnerable to similar internal fraud. The reputation I had earned through exposing David's crimes had created opportunities to help other victims while building a business that generated both financial independence and personal satisfaction. The first file contained a referral from Patricia Henley, the widow of a prominent real estate developer who suspected that her late husband's business partner had been embezzling funds for years. Her case bore striking similarities to the Bennett situation, involving complex financial structures designed to hide money movement and a charismatic individual who had used charm and family connections to avoid scrutiny of suspicious activities. The second case involved Margaret Chen, a successful attorney who had discovered that her husband was using their joint assets to fund gambling debts and secret business ventures that violated her professional ethics requirements. Her situation demonstrated how financial deception could destroy careers and reputations, even when the victim had no knowledge of or participation in the fraudulent activities. These cases and dozens of others had established my firm as the premier resource for wealthy individuals navigating complex financial fraud situations where traditional legal and accounting services proved inadequate. My unique combination of forensic accounting expertise, personal experience with deception, and strategic understanding of how to gather evidence for maximum legal impact had created a niche market that generated substantial revenue while serving a genuine social purpose. Jessica Rodriguez had joined my firm as Chief Operating Officer, bringing her analytical skills and personal loyalty to help build an organization that could handle increasingly complex and high-profile cases. Her decision to leave Morrison and Associates had surprised many in Chicago's financial community, but she understood that our work represented an opportunity to address systematic problems that traditional firms often ignored or mishandled. "The Henley case is going to be particularly challenging," Jessica observed as we reviewed the morning's priorities. Her husband's business partner has political connections that could complicate investigation and prosecution efforts. We'll need to be strategic about evidence gathering to avoid the kind of interference that has protected corrupt individuals in the past. Her analysis was correct, and it reflected the broader patterns we had observed in Chicago's business community during the months since the Bennett family's downfall. While David's prosecution had sent shockwaves through the city's elite circles, it had also revealed the extent to which similar fraudulent activities were tolerated or ignored when perpetrators possessed sufficient wealth and political influence to avoid accountability. The Bennett Asset Recovery Services had evolved beyond individual casework to include policy advocacy and educational initiatives designed to address systematic vulnerabilities in how wealthy families managed their financial affairs and corporate governance. We had partnered with Northwestern University's business school to develop curricula on fraud detection and prevention, while also working with federal regulators to strengthen oversight of family office operations and trust management. Marcus had relocated to Chicago to serve as our chief forensic investigator, bringing federal law enforcement expertise that enhanced our credibility with prosecutors and regulatory authorities. His transition from government service to private sector consulting had been motivated partly by the recognition that our firm could address problems that traditional law enforcement approaches often missed or handled inadequately. The political corruption investigation is expanding faster than anyone anticipated, Marcus reported during our weekly strategy meeting. David's cooperation has led to evidence against 3 city council members, 2 zoning commissioners, and at least 1 federal judge who was receiving payments through Bennett Family shell companies. The U.S. Attorney's Office is treating this as the largest municipal corruption case in Chicago's history. The scope of criminal activity that had been uncovered through investigating David's individual fraud demonstrated why systematic reform was necessary rather than simply prosecuting isolated cases. The Bennett family's success had depended on a network of corrupt relationships that enabled them to manipulate zoning decisions, win development contracts through bribery, and avoid regulatory oversight through political protection. Addressing these problems required changes to laws, enforcement practices, and cultural attitudes that tolerated corruption when it was conducted by wealthy individuals with social prominence. My personal healing had progressed alongside the professional success of my firm, though the process had been more complex than I had anticipated during those dark months of investigation and evidence gathering. The pregnancy loss remained a source of profound sadness, but it no longer defined my identity or limited my vision for the future. The discovery that David had been actively preventing conception while encouraging fertility treatments had actually provided a form of closure, confirming that the loss was related to his malicious interference rather than any natural incompatibility between us. Dr. Amanda Foster had continued serving as my physician throughout this period, providing both medical care and counseling support as I navigated the emotional complexities of divorce, business development, and public notoriety that had followed the Foundation Gala revelations. Her guidance had been instrumental in helping me understand that healing didn't require forgiveness of unforgivable behavior, but rather acceptance of what had happened and commitment to building a meaningful future despite the trauma I had experienced. The divorce proceedings had concluded with a settlement that reflected both David's criminal liability and my contributions to building the assets that he had attempted to steal and hide. The prenuptial agreement that the Bennett family had insisted upon before our marriage contained clauses that voided financial protections in cases of criminal fraud, ensuring that David's crimes eliminated any claims he might have made against assets I had earned through my own professional success. Patricia Bennett's situation had proven more complex and ultimately more tragic than I had anticipated during the height of my anger about her cruel treatment during my grief. The federal investigation had revealed that while she had knowledge of some fraudulent activities, her role had been primarily as an enabler rather than an active participant in the criminal conspiracy. Her prosecution had resulted in probation and community service rather than imprisonment, but the destruction of her social standing and family reputation had been complete and irreversible. The Bennett Family Holdings had been dissolved through federal asset forfeiture proceedings, with recovered funds distributed to defrauded investors and charitable organizations that had been affected by the family's criminal activities. The Lake Forest estate had been sold at auction, with proceeds used to pay restitution to victims whose investments had been stolen through David's shell company arrangements. Bob Bennett had suffered a massive heart attack during the federal investigation, dying before criminal charges could be filed against him. Medical evidence suggested that the stress of watching his family's empire collapse had contributed to his death, creating a form of accountability that extended beyond legal consequences to include the ultimate price for a lifetime of corrupt behavior. Jennifer Chen Bennett had been disbarred and sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for her role in creating the legal structures that enabled David's fraud. Her conviction had sent shockwaves through Chicago's legal community, demonstrating that professional credentials and family connections couldn't protect individuals who participated in criminal conspiracies, regardless of their apparent respectability. Rebecca Bennett Walsh had avoided criminal charges, but faced civil liability for promoting investments that she knew were based on fraudulent financial statements. Her social media influence had evaporated overnight when her lifestyle was revealed to be funded through stolen money, and she had relocated to another state to escape the social stigma associated with her family's criminal activities. Mike Bennett had cooperated with federal investigators and received a reduced sentence of 3 years in prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation, during which he would be prohibited from holding any executive positions in financial or real estate companies. His cooperation had been motivated partly by concern for his daughter Emma, whose future had been threatened by the destruction of the family's assets and reputation. Lauren Parker had been sentenced to 18 months in federal prison for her role in receiving stolen funds through the fraudulent consulting arrangements that David had created. Her prosecution had been relatively lenient due to her cooperation with investigators and the recognition that she had been manipulated by David's superior knowledge of financial crimes and legal consequences. Upon release, she had relocated to another city and changed her name to escape association with the scandal. The transformation of my personal life had been as dramatic as the professional success of my firm. The woman who had been devastated by pregnancy loss and marital betrayal had evolved into someone who possessed confidence, independence, and a sense of purpose that extended far beyond individual healing to include protecting other potential victims from similar predatory behavior. My relationship status had become a subject of considerable speculation in Chicago's social circles, with various individuals attempting to position themselves as romantic interests now that my financial success and public notoriety had elevated my desirability in certain circles. However, my focus remained primarily on building my business and developing advocacy initiatives rather than pursuing new romantic relationships that might complicate my professional objectives. The media attention generated by the Bennett family scandal had created opportunities for speaking engagements and consulting relationships that extended my influence beyond Chicago to national and international audiences. I had delivered keynote addresses at conferences focused on white-collar crime prevention, family office governance, and women's leadership in financial services, using my experience to educate others about recognizing and addressing systematic fraud in family business operations. The financial success of Bennett Asset Recovery Services had exceeded all projections, generating revenues that enabled me to establish charitable initiatives focused on supporting women who had experienced pregnancy loss and domestic financial abuse. The Sarah Bennett Foundation provided counseling services, legal assistance, and financial education to help other victims rebuild their lives after experiencing betrayal similar to what I had endured. One of our most successful programs paired women who had survived financial abuse with volunteer mentors who provided career guidance and emotional support during the difficult process of establishing independent lives. The program had helped over 200 women during its first year of operation, demonstrating that personal trauma could be transformed into systematic assistance for others facing similar challenges. The partnership with Northwestern University had expanded to include research initiatives focused on understanding the psychological factors that enabled financial predators to manipulate their victims. Our findings had contributed to academic literature on domestic abuse, while also informing practical strategies for prevention and early intervention that could protect vulnerable individuals from exploitation. Marcus had begun developing relationships with federal law enforcement agencies to create training programs that would help investigators recognize and address family-based financial crimes more effectively. His work had revealed that the Bennett family case was representative of broader patterns of corruption that were often overlooked because perpetrators possessed social respectability and political connections that deflected scrutiny. The political ramifications of the corruption investigation continued expanding as David's cooperation led to evidence against additional public officials who had received payments through various Bennett family enterprises. The mayor's office had been forced to implement new ethics protocols and transparency requirements after several administration officials were implicated in the scandal, demonstrating that individual criminal prosecutions could catalyze broader governmental reforms. Jessica had begun writing a book about our experience exposing the Bennett family fraud, focusing on practical strategies that other potential victims could use to recognize warning signs and gather evidence of financial abuse. Her book proposal had attracted interest from major publishers who recognized public demand for accessible guidance on protecting personal assets from sophisticated fraud schemes. The second anniversary of my pregnancy loss had passed with reflection rather than despair, marking a milestone in my healing process that demonstrated how personal tragedy could be transformed into motivation for meaningful work that helped others. While the sadness remained, it no longer dominated my emotional landscape or limited my vision for the future. Dr. Foster had cleared me for future pregnancy attempts if I chose to pursue them, but my priorities had shifted toward building professional legacy and advocacy initiatives rather than traditional family formation. The possibility remained open, but it no longer felt essential to my happiness or identity in ways that it had when my self-worth was tied to meeting other people's expectations rather than my own values and goals. The anniversary of the foundation gala had become an occasion for celebration rather than trauma, marking the moment when my life had transformed from victimhood to empowerment through the strategic application of professional skills and personal courage. The Drake Hotel now hosted an annual benefit dinner for the Sarah Bennett Foundation, raising funds to support women recovering from financial abuse, while also serving as a reminder that accountability was possible even for powerful individuals who believed themselves immune to consequences. Standing at my office window on a crisp autumn morning exactly 2 years after the gala that had changed everything, I reflected on the extraordinary journey from personal devastation to professional triumph that had defined my transformation. The pregnancy loss that David and his family had celebrated as the end of a distraction had actually freed me from obligations to protect people whose corrupt behavior deserved exposure rather than loyalty. The Bennett family had given me a loss they thought I'd never recover from, not understanding that it would become the catalyst for giving them a loss that truly was irreversible. Their criminal empire had been dismantled, their political influence eliminated, and their social standing destroyed through the precise application of evidence and accountability that they had never anticipated from someone they had dismissed as emotionally unstable. My phone buzzed with a text message from a potential new client whose husband was suspected of using their joint assets to fund secret business ventures that violated federal securities laws. Her case would require the same methodical investigation and strategic revelation that had characterized my approach to exposing David's crimes, demonstrating that the skills I had developed through personal necessity had become professional expertise that could help other victims achieve justice. The woman who had lost her pregnancy and discovered her husband's betrayal had become the architect of systematic change that protected other potential victims while building a business empire more ethical and sustainable than anything the Bennett family had ever created. The phoenix hadn't just risen from the ashes of personal trauma. It had transformed the landscape of accountability for wealthy individuals who believed their resources and connections placed them above the law. As I prepared for another day of investigations and client consultations, I understood that true recovery from betrayal didn't require forgiveness or reconciliation, but rather the strategic transformation of personal pain into protective systems that served broader purposes than individual healing. The Bennett family's cruelty had created unintended consequences that extended far beyond their ability to control or contain, proving that justice sometimes emerged from the most unlikely sources when victims possessed both the skills and determination to demand accountability. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.